Hey, welcome to your Sagittarius horoscopes for the week of November 12th through the 18th. Sagittarius season is upon us next week, but that's next week, not this week. We have Mercury in Sagittarius this week. We also have the moon coming into Sagittarius this week as well. Looking at Mercury and what Mercury is doing, Mercury is in a square with Saturn. This week, the moon does join that Monday and Tuesday and amplifies it just a little bit. Focus is on career, and Mercury's focus is very much on career, with Saturn really focused on self, which is kind of interesting. Saturn really is all about your responsibility, and so we're pointing that responsibility at ourselves and in a way taking personal responsibility for the situations that are going on in our lives. Now, what's interesting to me about this is that the world is full of finger pointers, is what I call them. Everybody's pointing the finger at somebody else for the reason why things aren't working out for them. They're not pointing the finger at themselves. Of course, as it turns out, every time you point the finger, there are three pointing back at you. So really, Saturn, this is an issue with taking personal responsibility for what's going on in your career, even if there are other people involved in this. The bottom line here is this: if you're a victim of somebody's choices once, that's on them. If you're a victim of somebody's choices 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, that's on you. That's your responsibility. You're not learning anything from that situation. You're continuing to fall into somebody else's destructive pattern for whatever your reasons are. Now, in that situation, lots of people continue to point the finger at the person who's making bad choices, which makes total sense. But at some point, you got to take responsibility for your life and walk away from that, or find a way to protect yourself from that. Mercury is not all bad, though, because Mercury and the moon as well are also in a grand sextile with Pluto as well as Venus this week. Now, Pluto is focused on inner trauma. It doesn't sound very helpful, but our inner trauma can be a very valuable resource depending on the situation. And Venus's focus is on finances and finding creative ways to deal with those finances. So when we're dealing with Mercury being focused on career here, I really feel that the challenge with Saturn there is just sort of showing us not that you need to take responsibility for your stuff, but also showing us just how powerful we are when we do take responsibility for that stuff. It changes everything. Besides, if we think about it, when you're pointing the finger at somebody else, you're giving that person power over your life, power to make changes, power to manipulate it, power to destroy it. But when you take responsibility for your own problems, you have the power over your life. You now have the power to transform, to change, to make better, to destroy your own life. And so Pluto's influence in terms of this trauma is also showing you that you have the power to do that too. Just because you can't change the past doesn't mean that you can't find a place to live that is still comfortable despite the trauma. Let me explain. One thing that we all have in common, that every single one of us is going to go through at some point or another in our lives, is loss. Somebody that we love is going to die. It's just life, it's so much a part of life that we cannot get away from it. And me personally, the last, I would say, Oh gosh, I can't even think anymore. I would say the last 7, 8 years, there has not been a year, knock on wood, up until this year where I have not experienced loss, which is absolutely not true. Um, because technically I did experience a loss a couple of days ago with an animal, and they do count with one of my pets. It's hard. And every single time it happens, it's really difficult to get yourself through the grief process, to get yourself back into the swing of things, to get yourself moving in a direction that's successful to you. But it's your responsibility to do that. And the more you are actively working on that, the easier the process is on you. It's still a difficult process. It's still upsetting. You're still dealing with loss. That part isn't going to go away. The question is whether or not the loss defines you, or you define the loss in terms of it's a piece of your life and not the whole entire thing. And I have struggled with this for a really long time in terms of struggling through all of the many grief cycles that unfortunately I have had to go through in the last several years, because it's a part of life and there's no way around it. The people that I love are more than likely going to leave me, and part of at least that group, and then there's another group that's going to have to grieve my loss. There's no way around that. What's funny to me as human beings is that this is such a definition of life that from the time that humans were created, we still haven't really figured out a way to deal with this. We really still haven't figured out that we have to appreciate people while they're here, because you never know when they're not going to be there. But that's just one of those life mysteries that an Aquarian and a Sagittarian could probably have a really good conversation about at another time. For this in particular, we're really looking at using either using our trauma to our advantage, or getting over the hurdle of our trauma so that we can clear a space to be able to be successful in terms of our career goals. And communication is really important, because of course Mercury is at the helm there, and Mercury is your biggest influence being in Sagittarius. So that's what I have for you guys this week. If you love your horoscopes, do consider sending a tip or donation through my coffee link, which is there in the description. I do love all of my coffees. Appreciate that very much. I'm Melissa Bruce, Heavy Metal Psychic. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys next week. And in the meantime, you guys kick some butt. I mean, you're Sagittarians, for crying out loud. If anybody is going to be successful, it's going to be you guys, because the amount of energy that you put into it. But don't let your past or any of those other little stupid things that people do get in the way. Own up to your own stuff. Don't take responsibility for anybody else's stuff, and just be badass. That's all that's required of you. It should be pretty simple. I'll see you guys next week. You guys, as usual, make it a great week.